Welcome everybody to episode number 6 of the First Strike Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the best discipline, the best combat sports background for a successful career in mixed martial arts. I am your host, and I go by the Marathon Don. So let's jump right into it. The best combat sports background for a successful career in mixed martial arts. What is it? So a few weeks ago, I was watching a UFC event, and I got to thinking to myself, which martial art can dominate each other? Which is the best one? Which one is the one that you need to become a successful champion in the UFC? And I decided to break it down into two big categories. The first category, striking combat sports, grappling combat sports. In striking, I believe the top 4 sports are boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, and karate. And out of these 4 different disciplines, which is the one that is mandatory, the one that's most important for a successful career in mixed martial arts? And I have to say, I believe it's kickboxing. And let me tell you why. Out of all 4 disciplines, kickboxing transcends the best into the octagon, the best into the world of mixed martial arts. And why is that? The reason is you have more weapons that are more developed as compared to the other styles. If you think about a boxer, they have the best hands in the business. But guess what? They are not familiar with the kicks. They're not going to be able to block the kicks. They're not going to be able to work against the kicks. You take your best boxer, you put him up against a Muay Thai practitioner, the Muay Thai practitioner all day. You take your best boxer, put him up against a karate fighter, the karate fighter all day. All they have to do is throw one hard low kick from a distance. Guess what? The kick is going to reach the opponent much faster than a punch will ever will. Just to reach alone, like your legs are much longer than your arms. So a boxer, out of the equation. Like boxing is great, it's phenomenal, you need that, but you need to implement your kicks, point blank period. Now, we're down to karate, Muay Thai, and kickboxing. Muay Thai and kickboxing, I feel like they have a different level of mastery of the kicks as opposed to a karate fighter. A karate fighter, they master the one strike kill. They're very elusive and they focus on that one strike, that opening. So what happens is they move. However, I feel like in combat sport, there's a point, it's a judge scored based system. So kickboxers and Muay Thai, they have more weapons that allow them to score more points because their styles is not predicated on constantly moving. And we've seen it time and time again. You know, in combat sports, Lyoto Machida, he revolutionized the karate style in MMA, becoming a former UFC light heavyweight champion. But what happened when he faced a more well-rounded striker, he would lose decisions. And it's because a lot of kickboxers and Muay Thai, they just have a style that allows them to throw more. They don't have to wait. You know, for every 5 shots they throw, they might land 2. But guess what? The karate fighter is just waiting for that opening, that one-shot kill that sometimes never comes. So now we boiled it down to 2. We have Muay Thai and kickboxer. What is the best striking combat sport for MMA? In my opinion, I theorize that is kickboxing. And let me tell you why. Muay Thai, the art of 8 limbs. You're using your elbows, you're using your knees, you master the clinch. I think it's a phenomenal art. But I do think that kickboxers, they know how to work the distance more. The way that the striking is developed, it allows you to really swiftly develop each limb to be much more strategic, much more powerful than in Muay Thai. You're able to work the distance more. It's almost more like a competition and less of a fight. Where I feel like Muay Thai is more of a fight. You want to get close and personal, to hit them with the elbows and the knees. You really want to knock out your opponent and put a lot of damage on them. Whereas kickboxing, I feel like there's an element of a competition where sometimes fighters are looking to score points. They're able to move, they're able to work the offense as the defense, their kicks are much smoother, they work the low kicks, the high kicks, they're able to work the jab. You will rarely see a Muay Thai fighter with a jab. So I do think that the jab is one of the most underrated weapons in striking all over the world. Doesn't matter what background, what art you're doing, in boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever, jab is the most important punch because you're keeping your distance, you're working the opponent, keeping your distance, but at the same time using it to set up punches. You can use it to get closer, to get away. There's so many different reasons why you could use a jab, and I don't feel like Muay Thai fighters have a jab, if any at all. They don't really use it, and I feel like kickboxers, the way that the sport is developed, you develop a style that's very, very judge friendly. So you're able to sway the judges if you want to, and you're able to close the distance, move around. I feel like because of the footwork involved, the footwork gives it an advantage over Muay Thai. So if I had to pick the best striking combat sport discipline for MMA, I would say kickboxing. Individuals like Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, Stephen the Wonderboy Thompson, they have revolutionized what it is to be a kickboxer and transition over to MMA. So that is what I conclude. Now let's move over to grappling. In grappling, I think grappling it's fundamental. Grappling, a lot. Think about rock paper scissors, where paper always beat rock, rock always beat scissor. MMA is very similar in a regard where some combat sports always beat others, and I think grappling is the one category that completely dominates striking. You take your best grappler, put him up against the best striker, like it's 99% of the time the grappler is going to win. And within grappling, there's 4 disciplines that I believe are the most dominant, and those are wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Sambo, and Judo. And within those 4 arts, there's so many different variables. I think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu completely dominates Judo and Sambo, because Judo and Sambo, you're able to, it has a lot of throwing elements that you have to really get close, but what happens is when you get close, you're giving the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner the ability to lock in a submission. So because those arts are not really based on holding your opponents down or really keeping your opponents away, is more like a throwing. I feel like by the time you get close, you're giving the jiu-jitsu player the opportunity to hold you and lock you in a submission. Jiu-jitsu, it's a chess match. You're constantly moving one step closer towards dominating your opponent or submitting your opponent. And what happens is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are masters of control. Masters. And if a Sambo player or Judo is able to really put forth their art, they have to get close. They have to get close to distance. And if you're a jiu-jitsu player, that's exactly what you want. They want them to get close to you. So if a Sambo player gets close to someone that is a master of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that person is going to just literally tap them out. And there's so many amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mixed martial artists in the game. Think about Charles Oliveira. You get close to that guy, like he's locking you in an arm bar, a triangle, even Minotauro Nogueira, the heavyweight legend. These are guys that you can't even get close to. So if you're a judo player or a Sambo player, it's very difficult to really dominate a jiu-jitsu player, because you have to get close to impose your will. And when I think about Sambo, I think about someone like Fedor Emelianenko, but obviously he developed the striking and he had the submission to go along with it. I think about Habib Nurmagomedov, who also practiced Sambo, but also infused it with a lot of wrestling as well. And when I think about judo, I think about, of course, Ronda Rousey. I mean, Ronda Rousey is a perfect example. She was a one-trick pony. She was a former Olympic bronze medalist in judo, and she transcended. She single-handedly transcended women's MMA because of her judo background. She was able to close in, work that hip toss, and then lock everybody in that armbar. And for so many years, it was almost impossible to stop that. But she was not able to develop her striking to the point that she was able to keep off the best strikers. So what happened was, when someone like Holly Holmes or Amanda Nunes, they knew her game, they were able to keep their distance, they were able to quickly pick her apart and knock her out, leading to her to retire to MMA. She suffered 2 brutal back-to-back finishes because she was a one-trick pony. Once her judo style, those judo tosses didn't work anymore, she was unable to prevent them from striking with her. She wasn't able to develop the striking. So I do think that that judo is good, but I don't think that is the most dominant. If I was to think about the most dominant between judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Sambo, I'm going Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all day. I think judo and Sambo are too dependent on closing the distance, and that plays into the game of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Now, we've got to talk about wrestling versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What is the most dominant mixed martial arts? And hands down, I gotta say, it's wrestling all day. It's just a different level of grit, a different level of intensity. the ability to change levels is something that, as a wrestler, you're able to get under the legs of a jiu-jitsu player. You could take them down, you could prevent the takedown, and you could stop them from imposing their game. Where a Brazilian jiu-jitsu player, they're trying to work submissions, they're trying to control you, and if they can't control where the fight takes place, they're stuck. They're gonna lose the fight. They're gonna be on their ass trying to pull guard, or they're gonna get taken down and held down against their will. And we've seen it time and time again. You take your best jiu-jitsu practitioner, put him up against the best wrestlers, jiu-jitsu player is going to be a fish out of water. He's not going to be able to impose his style. And if you think about the great champions, the former great champions in the UFC, a lot of them have been wrestlers. Think about Georges St. Pierre, if not the greatest welterweight champion of all time. He was able to use his wrestling to dominate fighters. He's fighting the best jiu-jitsu players, he's fighting strikers, and he's using his wrestling, he's mixing them to take down, to gas them out, to control the fight, to wear them down, and that wrestling carried him to multiple welterweight championships, and eventually he moved up in weight and became middleweight champion. Like I mentioned before, Khabib Nurmagomedov, like no one was stopping this guy's takedown. Like the way he would move under his opponents, like it doesn't matter if you was Charles Oliveira or if you were the best striker in the world, like you were not stopping his takedowns. And when I think about wrestling, it's the ability to not only be on the offensive. Like if you're going takedown after takedown after takedown and you're a very strong wrestler, you're going to get the takedown and the other guy's not going to be able to prevent it. However, if you decide that you do not want to you don't want to wrestle, your wrestling ability is strong enough that you could defend against other styles. I think about someone like Chuck Liddell, the legendary UFC Hall of Famer Chuck Liddell. He innovated and mastered what was called the sprawl and brawl. This was a style that a lot of individuals like Rampage Jackson, Chuck Liddell, who were great wrestlers, they would use their wrestling as the opposite. They would use it to disengage and stop the grappling efforts from their opponent and force their opponents to strike with them where they would quickly knock them down. And I think with wrestling is just the level of grit. Myself, I've practiced jiu-jitsu for many years, and I've gone against wrestlers, and these guys, I mean, they're going 95 miles per hour. Where jiu-jitsu is like a chess match, wrestling is like a speed chess match. You know, the amount of intensity, the athleticism that is developed in that sport, I just think is almost impossible for other grappling sports to catch up on. And I think that the fundamental grappling martial art that dominates all others is wrestling. Another great example is Daniel Cormier, John Jones. I mean, these are guys that they're wrestling. They were able to dominate so many countless fighters for many years. They're fighting great strikers, they take them down. They're fighting great grapplers, they force them to stand up and work the striking. It's just something that's such a powerful weapon that allows you to, I mean, it's a key to victory. And I do think for anyone looking to be an up and coming MMA fighter, I think you have to wrestle. Period. You have to wrestle. The cardio, the tenacity that you develop is something that overpowers all grappling arts. So now we've concluded that wrestling is the best grappling combat sport. We concluded that striking is the best striking combat sport. Not striking, kickboxing, right? So now, which is the most out of those two? Which is the best, right? Like which one is necessary? Which is the most important discipline for a successful career in mixed martial arts? Is it wrestling or is it kickboxing? And I'm here to tell you that it is wrestling. Kickboxing is phenomenal. You need kickboxing to be successful, but guess what? You're not going to be able to stop the wrestler. Like, unless you're going to be doing a Jorge Masvidal flying knee to Van Askren's head, you know, you're not going to be able to stop the wrestler. I feel like wrestling has so many different advantages. You're able to dictate the pace of the fight. You're able to defend any grappling. You're able to hold your opponent down. You're able to work positions. You're able to out-cardio them. Think about someone like Cain Velasquez that uses wrestling. I mean, he was known as a cardio machine. He uses his wrestling cardio as a weapon to tire down his opponent. He just kept taking them down. They'll get up and he takes them down again. And it's something that it's so dominant. There's so many champions. Matt Hughes, Georges St. Pierre, Daniel Cormier, John Jones, among so many others. And Khabib Nurmagomedov retiring undefeated because of his wrestling. And I think that wrestling is at the point now where there's different elements of wrestling that are still being discovered. For example, recently with Habib Nurmagomedov, they use a lot of chain wrestling, right? And that standing in wrestling, where they're not just going for one takedown, they're going for a single leg, and if they can't get that, they transition to another takedown. They're working body locks, and I just think that there's so many different elements of wrestling that wrestlers are still discovering and innovating and implementing in mixed martial arts that is very, very difficult. Where a sport like boxing and kickboxing, a lot of the styles have already been implemented and crossed over. Wrestlers are still innovating and creating new styles that is very, very difficult to defend. It's something that's foreign, and I do think that if you're looking to start MMA today and you're looking to become a mixed martial art fighter, there's no better road than wrestling. I wish that if I could go back in time, that would be the one sport that I would practice. And just make sure that if you do get into wrestling, try to get some ear guards so you don't develop the cauliflower ear. I know that a lot of wrestlers, for them, is like a badge of honor. I don't really like it, but yeah, I think wrestling is the number one discipline, the number one combat sports background if you want to be a successful MMA fighter. So yeah, moving on. This weekend, it was a very quiet weekend in the world of combat sports. There was UFC Vegas. Big shout out to Jared Cannonier, who finished Gregory Rodriguez, also known as RoboCop, in the fourth round. And I think that was a great comeback win for Jared Cannonier. He really needed that victory because he hasn't had a successful few past fights. So I do think that this puts him right back in the mix. And I think right now is a perfect time for him to fight someone like Michael Venom Page. I think Michael Venom Page is such a fun fighter at middleweight. I think it's a great fight for the fans. It's a great fight for Jared Cannonier and also Michael Venom Page. So I think that's the fight to make for Jared Cannonier. For someone like RoboCop, I do think that he's a fan favorite. He has a very fan favorite style, and I think someone like Brendan Allen would be a great fun fight, or maybe like a Marvin Vettori. I think that'll also be a great fight to get him like a name opponent. I do think he's at the point in his career where he could get those popular fights and potentially main event another fight night. So it's a big win for Jared Cannonier, puts him right back in the mix. Good fun fight to watch. The other notable fight on the card that stood out to me was Calvin Kattar versus I believe the name is Youssef Salah. Sorry if I mispronounced the name, but a tough loss, tough pill to swallow for Calvin Kattar. This is someone that at one point was looked at as a title contender. He had a tremendous fight against Max Holloway, but in his last fight against Sterling, he got thoroughly dominated by the wrestling, right? Which I mentioned earlier was the most dominant martial art. But I think for someone like Calvin Kattar, I just think that he's almost at a crossroads, and he really got to decide. I think his next matchup is going to be very telling of what happens in his career. Is this his downfall? Can he bounce back from this? I think that losing to someone that is not as popular and isn't a rising contender tells you a lot. This is the second fight in a row where I feel like he's been dominated a little bit, and I think that his next fight is really going to tell us where he's at. Like, is he going to be able to bounce back and put together some wins and get back on that championship directory, or is he kind of like a gatekeeper now? And I do think that war against Max Holloway might have taken a lot of his confidence. So I'm very interested to see where he goes from here. It's very sad to see his downfall. I'm a big fan of Calvin Kattar, so I do hope that he bounces back. But for someone like Zala, it's a great victory, a great feather in the cap, and a good name under his belt. There's so many fighters in that weight division, so very interesting times to see what happens next. So moving on, I think next week we have Henry Cejudo's fighting. And we have the big boxing match, Bivol versus Beterbiev, the rematch for the undisputed title. And then, of course, in the world of pro wrestling, Jey Uso just announced that he's going to be fighting Gunther at WrestleMania, which for a lot of fans is a letdown because they're saying, hey, you won the Royal Rumble, but you're going to go for the secondary title. So I do think that in the world of pro wrestling, it's very interesting to see, who's going to fight Cody Rhodes for the title of WrestleMania. I think for Jey Uso, it gives him a shot to redeem himself. I wasn't a big fan of how he lost at the Saturday main event and then won the Royal Rumble and is going to go on for a bigger championship when he just lost to Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. So I think that there's a good story, a good angle there to have him revisit that, become a champion, win his first world title at WrestleMania by getting revenge on someone that beat him. And by winning the Royal Rumble, I feel like he chose a path that nobody would have chosen. Like everybody else would have gone for the WWE title. So I think that he's choosing the road less traveled. So shout out to him. I'm excited to see where that goes. But overall, that's it for episode number 6. If you like what you saw, make sure you subscribe, comment, and like. I am your host, the Marathon Don. Every week, I will pour out a new episode for you guys. This is your brand new cultural hub for MMA and combat sports. This is a First Strike podcast. Here, we strike first, we talk later. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And make sure you check out my past episodes. Every single day, I'll be posting out some content. I am the Marathon Don, and I am...